My special guest is Kevin Luhrs, who is currently an associate principal scientist at the Gatorade Sports Science Institute, which is located on the campus of the IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. He also played defensive lineman for the Nebraska Cornhuskers and was the team dietitian and assistant strength coach for 9 years at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As we'll talk a little bit more about, Kevin has also had his own personal experiences with injury, which, as I understand it, have had a significant impact on his life, particularly over the last few years. So you have a lot of insight, both from a professional standpoint and also from a personal standpoint with injury. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Les. Great to be on.
Talk to us a little bit, if you would, Kevin, about your professional background and how did you become a sports dietitian and how did you end up working in the NFL?
Yeah. So, I basically, I come from an athletic background. I mean, my parents started me in sports ever since I could remember. And, I think the first sport I played was soccer, and I was joking around about it with my mom the other day. She got me into gymnastics. She threw me into tennis lessons, golf lessons. I basically did everything. So all the way up until through high school, and then I played football in college, like you said, and that was about 50 pounds ago as a defensive lineman, and so. When I first got into college, I was always trying to, not only keep weight on, but put more weight on, and what was the best way to do that? And that's where I stumbled upon nutrition. Now we did have a dietitian at Nebraska. His name was James Harris, and so he helped me a little bit on the way, but a lot of it just came through my own interest in sports nutrition. So, so I went in to the curriculum of nutrition science and dietetics in my undergrad, and graduated. When I went my internship with the Baptist Health System in San Antonio, which is primarily clinically based, medical nutrition therapy and hospital dietetics, for lack of a better word. And then I just utilized my connections after my internship. Since I didn't have any sports nutrition experience, I went back to the University of Nebraska as a dietitian, as a registered dietitian, and I volunteered for Josh Hinks and Lindsay Remmers at the time, who were the dietitians there. Mm-hmm. And that was in 2009 when I was volunteering. And at the time I lived in Omaha, and in Lincoln is about an hour away. So I was driving down about 3 or 4 times a week and waking up at 4 a.m. and opening up the shake station for the football players that were coming in for their morning workouts and making their shakes, post-workout shakes and whatnot, getting them ready for practice with their pre-workout supplements, post-workout recovery, so on and so forth. And then, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers called Josh and asked if there was anyone that he would recommend for their new role that they were instilling with the Buccaneers as the team dietitian. And he said, "I think I got a guy for you." And so, I wish I could say that I was qualified for that job, but truth is, I mean, I think sports nutrition is relatively new. Truth is, I was 25 years old at the time, and I had no idea what I was doing in terms of like developing a nutrition department, but I didn't have anything to call my own. I was relying on a lot of like A&D resources and whatnot, collateral. Yeah. But I just hit the ground running and never looked back. And so moved to Tampa. Was a team dietitian as well. I was in the strength coach role as well. Like you said, did that for 9 years.
Yeah.
And so I guess to answer your question, I was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
I had faith that, going back and volunteering on top of going to school and on top of having a paid job where I was personal training at the time, making, I think it was $9.50 a session, that I had faith that going back to the University of Nebraska and volunteering was it's what I wanted to do, and it was what I knew I wanted to do, and
Yeah.
that's what I did. So, like I said, 9 years later, like I didn't expect to be in the league for 9 years. As a matter of fact, my boss at the time told me during my interview before he offered me the job, he was like, this team's probably not going to be very good, and we could get fired at the end of the season. So this could be just a resume builder for you. And I
Yeah.
was like, I don't care. You're paying me more than what I was making back at personal training job. So I'm ready to do this. Not only
Right.
that, but I'm in the NFL. So, but yeah, that was my reign with the Bucs. And then, as we'll talk about in a little bit, my injury came about, and I just made the jump from the Bucs to GSSI. So
Yeah. Was that an aspiration of yours, Kevin, to work in professional sports or specifically in pro football?
I knew when I was in college, as the wheels started to turn, and I say that like in college because, quite honestly, growing up in Nebraska, I didn't know what I want. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was older. Like all I wanted to do was play Nebraska football. That's
Yeah.
it. Like Nebraska football, like those to a young kid, young male, and even just in general to a lot of the fans, like the players are gods in the state of Nebraska. I didn't like the NFL actually when I was growing up. I didn't watch a game. I like Major League Baseball actually better. I like the NBA better. I actually hated the NFL. But I knew when I got into college, and knowing that I wasn't going to go to the next level, I did have an idea that, because actually of James Harris and Lindsey Remmers and sort of those trailblazers, who were in the sports as full-time dietitians. I did know that I wanted to be in the sports realm in some capacity, whether it was in college, high school, or pro. I didn't know it would be the NFL until the Buccaneers came calling.
Yeah. And what was it about football that you found appealing? Because you mentioned your mom and got you into different sports.
Yeah. So the first time I played football was when I was in the third grade, and I hated it. I was always big for my age. So to give you an illustration or a better idea of how big I was in the first grade, I remember getting on the scale, and this was when the Visiting Nurses Association came to my school, and they did all basically the physicals for all the kids, and I jumped on the scale, and I was 99 pounds in first grade, and at the time I was just turning 7.
Yeah.
And I knew when I got on the scale and I got off, and the nurse was like, "Oh, Kevin." I knew that that I was definitely an anomaly. But again, when I was in the third grade, I was 125, 130 pounds, so I was a big kid, playing on a 5th and 6th grade team. Hated it. And I didn't play again until I was in the 7th and 8th grade. And again, I was still bigger than everybody. I was at that point, I was starting to become more athletic. I don't ever say that I was an athlete back then. I was just more developed. I was more mature. I was just a step ahead of everybody, or a couple steps maturation wise. But my athleticism kind of developed a little bit over those years. And as far as football in the game, it was just I was just bigger than everybody, and I could hit hard, and I just love to hit people. And and so it just kind of carried over, like the fact that I wanted to be a Nebraska football player. That was my number one goal.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I didn't have any career aspirations after that. It was just like, well, I could be a doctor, or I could be a lawyer. You know, I don't know, I could even be a PT or a physical therapist. I had no idea. I was open
Right.
to
Right.
whatever.
Right. Your focus was more on the immediate future, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so at what point, I mean, you said you loved hitting people, but you also mentioned that you didn't like football initially. So at what point did that start to change, or did you start to gain more of an interest in it?
Yeah. And I loved hitting people, but at the same time, I was such a big kid. I was a little, like when I was in third grade, I was a little bit, uh, out of shape. Like when the coaches would tell us to run to the tree and back, like that to me was like my nightmare every night. I was just huffing and puffing, and so the conditioning was one thing. I think that unfortunately the mental aspect was, even at that age, it was one of those things where um, I was kind of afraid of the coaches. Again, they kind of took an old school approach, and they were yellers, just like most football coaches are, and I took it very personally, especially as a third grader on a fifth and sixth grade team.
Yeah.
And there were some things that they would say about me that I would never tell mom and dad to this day, but so I wasn't really down for that type of a sport. And I guess I started to, when I was in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, me being a Husker fan, I was just like, I started to want to get back into it. And it's like, well, if I want to be a Nebraska football player, I got to play football.
Right.
So then seventh grade, I went back out, and and this time I was playing with my friends, people that were actually of my age.
Yeah.
And so that made it 10 times more fun.
Yeah.
And so that was a big reason for me going back out. Was it was one of the things I knew I had to do, and it was I got to enjoy it a little bit more with my friends.
Yeah. Would you say that the feedback that you got from coaches, did that impact your sport experience?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, probably more than I even realized today, but I still, I mean, being a third grade, I think, gosh, what was that, 9 years old at the time, you know, um, being called fat when you're that young, you always remember that. And I don't care how old you are, it's going to hit you in some way. So,
Mm.
I just, yeah, it just kind of created this fear in me, as well as just like it wasn't a good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And on top of that, it was one of those things where I didn't have a love for the game at that point. Quite honestly, I went out because I wanted to have a helmet. I wanted to have the jersey and the shoulder pads and the uniform, and so that was another reason for it as
Right.
well. So, but
Right.
it definitely impacted me. I still remember those comments, which I guarantee you the coaches today, wherever they're at, they probably have no idea that they affected anybody in that way for
Right.
this
Right.
long time period.
Right. It sounds like by the time you started maturing and getting a little bit older, you said that just playing with your friends was a primary motivation.
Yeah, playing with my friends. Gosh, even to this day, those friends that I played with in junior high, and throughout all of grade school, like are still, like, they were in my wedding, 10 years,
Mhm.
11 years ago. I still talk to them to this day. They're still some of my best friends. When you are, my mom always called it husky, but when you are that big, and probably a little bit overweight, I started to shoot up more vertically instead of just horizontally. So I started to grow into my weight, so to speak, and
Mhm.
and with that, develop a little bit more athleticism. I was a little bit better as an athlete in all sports. And so I think there was this sort of I just wanted to take advantage of that,
Yeah.
So it was fun playing sports, especially when you were just dominating.
Right. Right. Right.
So yeah.
And what was it like to realize your goal, or I don't know if it sounded like something of a dream, I guess, to play for Nebraska, to be a Cornhusker? What was that like when you found out that you were going to be doing that?
Definitely surreal. Like literally have like when people talk about dreams, like I literally had dreams as a kid of being on Tom Osborne Field, being in Memorial Stadium, like actually have that perspective of like looking around and 85,000 people, staring down at you. And it was a little bit spooky when that actually came to fruition. Um, and it was almost like deja vu. And so, back to your question, like the realization when I was even getting that first letter in the mail of from Nebraska and having the logo on the letterhead and saying like, hey, we're interested in you, like you should come to our summer camp. And go through the drills and the testing and all of that. I mean, I was on cloud nine. And as I went through high school, I was a linebacker, I was a tight end, I was a fullback, I was a defensive lineman. And it wasn't until my senior year, is like when I became a D lineman, they just said like, okay, just be a linebacker in a 3-point stance and just chase the ball. Like I was good at that. And so the coaches saw that and they wanted me to come in at first as a fullback. But then once they saw me at D line, they were like, okay, we're going to throw you in at D line, but we're not going to offer you a scholarship. You'll walk on. So take it or leave it. And I was like, done. I'll take it. Like, it didn't matter if I got a full ride somewhere else. I was going to Nebraska. So, and I think there was that realization from them because I came on several visits to Nebraska since they were just an hour down the road. They're like, I think we got this kid. So
Yeah.
But we got him for free.
Yeah, right. They didn't feel the need to fork over the big bucks when they knew you were intent on coming. But maybe you can share some of your highlights playing there.
So I always joke around with people. I played there like my redshirt sophomore year was when I first saw the field. I was backing up. He eventually went into the NFL. His name was Adam Carricker, and he played for the Rams for a few years. He was drafted first round, and then later on he was with the Redskins and maybe another team. But so I was second string behind him my sophomore year, and then that's when I started to kind of see the injuries transpire, and at first in training camp it was I broke a hand, my hand. I believe it was my uh, fourth metacarpal, and that was actually because we were doing a drill and my fist came down on Adam Carricker's knee, the guy that I was talking to you about, and broke my hand. I mean, that guy he was like Ivan Drago. The guy was just a beast. So there was that, and then I had a lot of soft tissue pulls, believe it or not. Even as a D lineman, had a lot of soft tissue pulls. I tore my quad in the middle of the season, so there was a lot of up and down to where I was in the rotation, and then I got injured. I was out of the rotation, and then I was back in, and it was just one of those things where you talk about the mental side, like it just got to me mentally, but. And I don't want to get too far ahead of the conversation, but the highlight was when I got in my first game against Iowa State, and I got a tackle. It was one of those. It wasn't the most it wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, but I got a tackle. And then the next game, I think it was against Texas Tech, I got in for a few more plays, and then it just kind of built from there. So again, I always say, people ask me like, did you play for Nebraska? I always say, no, I more or less practiced for Nebraska, but thanks anyway. But that was probably the highlight, was more or less my sophomore season, my redshirt sophomore season.
Right, right. So would it be fair to say, Kevin, that injuries hampered your playing time or experience there?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's pretty much all it was. And it's just the way it goes in that game. You could be a 5-star athlete coming out of high school, and they have all of the athleticism and potential in the world, but if you can't stay healthy, then and you're on the bench all the time, then it's not going to really pan out for you.
Yeah.
And in saying that, that gets to athletes mentally. There's no question about that, and that's exactly what happened with me as well.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can talk a little bit more about some of the impact of the injuries, the soft tissue injuries or your broken hand, what impact that had on you, I guess, from a psychological standpoint.
Yeah, so with athletes, when you get, I think athletes will always go through some sort of pain in their career. And like growing up, I can still hear, and it wasn't even really my coaches that were saying this, but it was not even my parents either. It was just like the parents around me. Again, like the friends that I had, we had a very close knit group of friends, and especially with our parents as well. So like my parents were my friends' parents, and then their parents were my parents, and you'd hear, from one of the parents especially, and I can still hear him saying this, know the difference between pain and injury.
Yeah.
And so I think there's truth to that, but at the same time, you have to realize when it stops being just pain and it is injury. And so, as an athlete, you don't, and especially as a football player, and it's such a high testosterone environment, you don't want to be labeled as soft, right? And
Yeah.
me sustaining so many injuries, that's kind of how I viewed myself. And we had some old school people within that department that were saying the same thing, like, you know, this is just pain, it's not injury, or you got to play through the injury. And so there's this rush to get back and not take your time in recovering and seeing your way through like the full recovery process, because as like if you may not be 100% ever, but you may not even make it to 70-80%. And as you go down in percentage, like the risk of getting injured again is very likely.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's kind of what transpired with me, is the rush to get back.
Yeah.
Hated being in the training room. um I think it was just one of those things where that often plays in the mind of an athlete, is just this, I need to get back, I need to get back, I need to get back, and they don't
Right.
really invest the full amount of time that's needed.
Right. And would it be fair to say that, or it sounds like you were alluding to this idea that the culture fosters that mindset? I don't know if specific coaches or physiotherapists, or why is it that athletes are in such a rush to get back?
I think it's again, I think it, so I, within the sports world, um, and you were an athlete too, there's always that linear progression. There's never a bell curve. It's always linear. And if a little is good, more is better. And coaches and support staff are always drilling into your head, if you're not getting better, then you're getting worse. Or if you're not working and someone else is, and they're outworking you, and being basically being in that atmosphere since I was, truly in that atmosphere since I was 18 years old, until the time I was 33. Like, even as a professional, like as a sports performance professional, as a dietitian, as a strength coach, like it's still, it never leaves you. You still have that mindset. And like as an athlete, like it was one of those things where it's kind of, I think it may be more of an old school mentality. I don't know exactly, but um, I think coaches first of all, and then athletic athletic trainers and PTs, if it kind of depends who you get. Like if you get more of an old school type of athletic trainer versus, whatever you want to call it, new school
Mhm.
athletic trainer. I think, with what we had at Nebraska, it was kind of the former mentality, and we had, they kind of compare you to the greats that came through there when they were winning national championships, and it was kind of
Mhm.
like that's not fair, you know. that's
Yeah.
that's not me, and so there was a lot of pressure. Like there was a lot of pressure that I put on myself, but I would say more so on myself than came from coaches or staff. But I think it was something that was brewed in us, that's in all athletes. That's something that's brewed in athletes. It's like you have to play through it. Like
Right.
don't play around it. You got to play through it.
Yeah.
And so there's that pressure that you may even feel more. It's magnified more so, maybe through a comment or whatever by an athletic trainer or a coach, and you're like, okay, you take that comment, and it may be totally out of context, but you'll take that comment as like, okay, I'm not doing enough, I need to do more.
Right.
So there's layers there. There's definitely layers there, and there's no one on this planet that could put more pressure on me than myself.
Right. Why is that? How did that develop?
Well, I constantly go back to that, and I try to go. I don't know, because my parents, they never, they were never like that with me. Like it was always like my mom and dad always, like I said before, they threw me into everything, but
Hmm.
there was never pressure from them. Like you have to, hit a home run every game, or you have to get 30 tackles every game, or you got
Right.
to score 30 points. Never any of that. Like they were very supportive, and I don't know. I think it was just the fact that maybe growing up I was always good at sports, and uh, I never really experienced failure,
Yeah.
until maybe like maybe later on in high school, but like truly in college, like when everybody else is just as good or if not better than you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not having that failure put a lot of pressure on me in college. Like, because, hey, Kevin, this is your dream. You're here. Now you got to do what you said you were going to do.
Yeah. It's interesting how you mentioned like maybe even just one comment could kind of amplify that mindset or the internalization of the kind of the need to maybe get back quick or play through the pain or whatever it might be in a particular circumstance that you already had a certain mindset, and then even just a simple comment could be taken and kind of I guess have a significant impact, it sounds like.
Mhm.
You mentioned also that football is a high testosterone environment, and one, or in your case, you mentioned an interest in avoiding being labeled soft. What were the implications of having that label, or if you felt that you were, what would be the implications of that?
You were lesser of a man, and you were, you know, you weren't tough. All football players are tough. Um, no football players ever cry or show emotion. They're just very stoic, robotic,
Mm.
and they just run through a wall. you
Right.
know.
Right.
And so, like I said before, like me knowing what I know about like the history of the program of Nebraska football, it's like, walking through the halls, with the All-American pictures of all these greats it was just like, wow, like number one, I can't believe I'm here. Number two, like I could never be these guys.
Yeah.
But maybe I can strive to be. And so there's that. And I think this holds true for a lot of athletes, but like even football players in general, and maybe even some of my teammates, is it's just like there was that again, that legitimate fear of failure, and the consequences that come, like the consequences that come with that, like even if it's just like little spurts of what do you want to call failure, just like screwing up technique or not being in the right place at the right time, not getting not tackling the guy to the ground or missing the tackle, and you just get yelled at, and it's
Yeah.
like you're trying to avoid, like at practice, it's not like you're trying to get better, so you're just trying to avoid getting yelled at,
Right. Right.
screamed at. But like back to your question, it's like one of those things. The implications of being labeled soft is just like I said before. It's just you're lesser of a man. You're lesser of an athlete. You're not a true football player. And then even going to the extent of saying like, well, you're never going to make it. You're never going to be who you want to be. You're never going to ever reach the top of those guys that you looked up to. And
Yeah.
so, were they saying that? Absolutely not. Was I thinking that? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was everything. It was something that again, I put all of this pressure on myself, and it's my own fault. But there are those little subtle comments that kind of cascade into something that they were never meant to be.
Sure. Sure. I guess in terms of your own injury experience, were you able to work through some of those doubts, or eventually it sounded like you were off and on the field, but you were able to return to the team,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, I mean, I was able to return. After I didn't have any major injuries. I didn't have any ACLs or you know, any sort of like arthroplasty, hip replacement or anything like that. I didn't have anything major. It was all just like small little nagging injuries. And every time I seem to get better, then all of a sudden something else happens, and whether it be a sprained ankle or whether it be another broken bone. So it was kind of like you're always just being taken down, and then there's frustration with that. You're like, is it me? Like, so you start kind of blaming yourself, and at one point, there comes a point where it's a business too in college, and coaches have to keep their jobs, and they'll have to demote you, and when that happens, that's just another load to carry.
yeah,
And I when that happened to me, I couldn't take it, and I quit for a period of time. I remember it was leading up to spring ball, and I remember I wasn't injured at the time. We were just going through winter conditioning, but I remember they put up the depth chart, and again, this is just a starting point. I always say like this is just a starting point. This is not an ending point. But like I took that very personally, and I had some other friends that were saying like this is kind of their way of saying like they're done with you, and you should just sever the tie and just leave. And I did. I quit for, I think it was a couple days.
yeah,
I just needed to clear my head a little bit, and I remember, when I came back, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna try to approach this a little bit differently, in a different mindset.
yeah,
Um, and just long story short, um, it was a thing where injuries were still happening. And as a matter of fact, my junior year of college, I just got, quite honestly, it was one of those things where I think it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, where I sustained my cartilage injury.
Mhm.
And I had a grade 4 full thickness tear of my lateral femoral condyle, and that was because I took on I took on a double team by 2, 3. I think one of them was 340 pounds, another guy was 315 pounds, just on one knee. And on top of that, when I was in high school, I had an ACL injury, but I'd never had issues with that. But it wasn't until in 2006 when I sustained this cartilage tear that, like, I wasn't ever really the same,
Yeah.
from a football perspective. And
Right.
thought in the back of my head is like, well, I'm gonna play through this. I'm gonna try and come back. But I had a microfracture surgery after that season. Um, Rehab wasn't going as well as I wanted it to, and in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, I'm in my senior year. I've been demoted. I don't know if I can play scout team, as a senior, and yet I still want to walk when I'm older.
Yeah.
So I told coach, I was like, if there's anything that I can do to help out the team, let me know, because I don't think I can't do it this year.
Yeah.
And so I was a student coach my senior year.
Right. Right. Um, so I guess during your college years, you're obviously pursuing your degree as well. Like I just think it's interesting that you are having these challenging experiences with injury, but then you're also pursuing a career that, as you said earlier, would keep you within the sport realm. So maybe you can speak to that a bit more.
Yeah, like I said, in college, I was like thinking about, James Harris's position, and what that would be like. I was like, that'd be kind of a cool job, even though at the time, he was one dietitian over 500 athletes. So he had to devote his attention to certain athletes, and which is totally understandable. But balancing all that with, I would say, arguably, is probably one of the hardest curriculums for an undergraduate in nutrition science, and it's for a lot of even just overall medical practitioners, doctors. That's what they get their undergraduate in before they go into med school,
Yeah.
which is great, but kind of tells you a little bit about how tough it can be.
Right.
And so battling, like being a student athlete, battling the injuries, and then on top of that, trying to maintain high GPA and straight A's, and just trying to be the best academically too, because that's that mindset as well. Is like, you got to be the best in everything, no matter if it's football, academics, or whether it's a game of ping pong. Like, you got to be the
Right.
best.
Right. Right.
And so the vision started to become, and it's kind of sad to say, um, once I got football kind of out of the way as an athlete, and focusing more on my academics, and while I was coaching, it dawned on me, like, okay, now I really got to think about what I'm going to do after college.
Right.
And
Right.
I was in the curriculum, but I wasn't fully grasping what I wanted to do. And so I was like, okay, I can work in a hospital. Um, I could work in a kitchen, which at the time, that was the highest paying job in dietetics, paying about 80,000 a year as a food service manager. I could work in the community, WIC, that sort of thing, or sports nutrition was just kind of like this up and coming thing. Like I said before, it's relatively new, and
Yeah.
again, like, kudos to the trailblazers out there, that kind of really just kind of set the tone, and helped us sports dietitians in the team setting out and just, kind of laying the tracks. But that was just something that, again, even through my internship, I didn't know if that was a reality or not. Like, and I had no idea how I was going to get there, but it was just like, that's okay. Well, maybe while I'm working in the hospital, maybe I could, volunteer at Nebraska, or maybe I could work and volunteer for Creighton, which they were in Omaha area, or they are in the Omaha area, UNO, things like that to get my foot in the door. But I didn't know exactly what that looked like. And I think that's very scary for obviously a lot of college undergrads and even graduates.
Sure.
So that's kind of how things were tending to flow after I knew that I was done with football.
Right.
Mostly because of injury. So
did you have aspirations at one point of playing pro football, or was it?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that, because I literally, I remember I was, I think I was a junior in college, and our head coach at the time came in and asked a random question. He was like, "How many of you want to play in the NFL?" And I literally was the only person that didn't raise his hand.
Yeah.
Because I was realistic with myself, and I was like, well, first of all, I don't want to go through another X amount of years of injuries. I knew that. And I mean, second of all, most importantly, I knew I wasn't good enough. And so, yeah, I knew right away, and it was kind of during that point where I was starting to kind of transition away from being totally in that athlete mindset and just focused on sports to like, okay, there's life after football. And that's the case for any athlete.
Yeah.
And so I guess I was lucky in that sense, is that I knew that, and I wasn't banking on the NFL.
Right. And you had mentioned, that you didn't want to continue to get injured. So you clearly had this awareness that playing in the NFL would in all likelihood entail more injuries. Is that correct?
Yeah, entail more injury, physical pain, just mental and emotional exhaustion, and I would say, that was sort of even if I was good enough, I think that I would venture to guess there might be a lot of football players even to this day that just they just went into the NFL just because they felt they had to, even though they didn't necessarily love the game anymore. And the mental emotional side, to me, far outweighed the physical side. Like the injuries were injuries. The pain was pain, like the bumps and the bruises and the cuts and broken bones. It was just like whatever. But again, that mental and emotional side, and that even that fear, like I said, that fear of failure, even outside of injury, like that trumped it for me. Like that would outweigh the physical aspect far more, because I loved to hit. I loved it. I loved banging around and tackling and blocking and but it was the mental emotional part that that did it for me. And then with that, the injuries were just so astronomical. It was just kind of like, I even think the athletic trainers at one point, they're like, "You're like a once a month guy." Like really, it was like, we expect you in here like every month. So that's how bad it got.
Would they say that explicitly, or
Explicitly?
was that
Yeah. And again, it's kind of one of those things where they were making those comments, and I don't fault them. I don't blame them for anything. I don't think they were being malicious. I think it was just one of those things where I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. I joke around with I'm a joker. I'm a jokester.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that but in the back of my mind, it was like, well, I wonder if they're like really thinking that I'm soft. I'm
Right.
not a real football player. Those sorts of things.
Right. Do
And
you
again,
think?
that's just kind of, that was me. That was all me. So.
Well, do you think the practitioners who made those comments, do you think there was some awareness of the potential impact it might have on you or others?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't answer that question. I mean, I would like to think not. Again, they weren't malicious
Right.
individuals at all. Um, but um, but yeah, again, we in that atmosphere, whether you're in college or professional, like it's pretty much the same atmosphere. You're seeing each other every single day, and
Yeah.
like you can't help but build those types of relationships and bust each other's balls and
Right.
those sorts of
Right.
things. And so that's where I mean, you got to be honest with yourself and honest with them. Like, you know, am I taking it out of context?
Mm.
Or like, is it starting to get to a point where I need to step in and say something?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking about some of your comments in terms of the impact of the game of football, irrespective of injuries. Would it be fair to say that the game takes not only a physical but also a psychological or mental toll on athletes or you specifically?
Without a doubt. I mean, I would say for all football players, for all athletes, I think we're just starting to realize that too, with the amount of depression and anxiety that we're seeing. And like, I always I watch the Today Show on most mornings, and I know there was a bit on NFL players and battling depression and anxiety, and just sort of the mental health aspect. And you know, back in the day, you just didn't hear about that. Like, that was non-existent. And not only that, but I shouldn't say non-existent, but as an athlete, even if you were experiencing that, there was shame in that,
Uh-huh.
right? You shouldn't be feeling that way. No matter what, you're a football player, you're a man, be a football player, be a man,
Yeah.
suck it up, that sort of thing. And so I think like there was a little bit of a crossover. I mean, just within like, I don't know, you know more about this than me, but like within the last 10 years, when we've started to see this crossover, and not just football players, but all athletes. And even right now, it's a big topic.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and so whatever it is, whether it just being chronic pain within your sport, um, whether it be injury, or whether it just having mental illness, or some sort of anxiety, depression, that you don't know why you're depressed.
Yeah.
And that's just a thing where it's like, where you sort of feel guilty too, because I've had that too. It's like you sort of feel guilty. It's like, my
Mm.
gosh, I'm blessed with so many gifts, and I have all of this in front of me, but yet like something's not right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would I would be surprised if there was an athlete out there that didn't experience that at some point in some way.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Kevin, you were 25 when you arrived into the NFL as a sports dietitian, and you obviously had your own personal experiences with injury and playing, high level and elite football. How or in what ways potentially did your experiences, I guess, as a former football player, impact your work, if at all, as a dietitian once you got to the NFL?
I mean, I took the mindset as I didn't want to be in the NFL as a player, but I'm here now as a practitioner, as a dietitian, as a strength coach, right? And it was almost a way for me, like, I never won a state championship in high school. I never won a national championship in college. It was like, okay, like, I can win a Super Bowl here. Not only that, but like, it was just a kind of a way for me to like hit the start over button, the reset button, and just like kind of start over. And it was a way for me to continue to blaze a trail for future dietitians in like full-time NFL dietitian roles. I was the third full-time dietitian at that point in the NFL. The Patriots, they had the first, not surprisingly, and then the Broncos hired a full-time dietitian, and that dietitian is actually still in the NFL, and I was the third. And so it was kind of a thing where I was like, even though I didn't necessarily, in my mind, and I guess some might say I'm a little harsh on myself, but I still to this day, I wasn't qualified to be in that position. But really, there wasn't a whole lot of people that were qualified and that had my background as a student athlete in the sport of football, and had his nutrition science and dietetics degree, was a registered dietitian, as well as a certified strength and conditioning specialist. So there was a lot of these like little nuances that I had that others didn't, and I had the experience that they liked me. The Buccaneers liked me because I could relate to the players. I could relate to the athletes, and they would listen to me, no matter how tip of the iceberg I got with nutrition and even strength and conditioning. So that was, like I said before, it was sort of like a way for me to just start over and really try to achieve something that I never really thought I would have the chance to. So it was very refreshing, and it was it was a thing too where I got out of Nebraska and I was away from something that I thought that I had failed, right? And when you're living in the state of Nebraska football is going to be there. So it was kind of a way for me to escape, and along with my wife, she was my fiance at the time, but I think for both of us to kind of escape, because she's been there since senior year of high school, so she was through all the ups and downs with me. So
right. Well, in many ways, seems you were uniquely qualified for the position, given your football experience and your academic training. But you also mentioned the relatability factor, and I'm wondering how that might have influenced your interactions with the players.
Yeah, I think it was, I think it was the fact that it's funny because when I don't have any stats. I was like, trust me, I played football in Nebraska, but you won't find any numbers on me. So I don't even try, but you may find a couple pictures, and I bring up my picture, sometimes in front of the team when I'm giving these nutrition talks, and I put up my, college picture of me in my uniform with the pot belly and everything at 285 pounds. And everyone just kind of like, dude, for real? And you just immediately I call them tokens, but you have those tokens of just
Credibility.
having those conversations of whether it be actual football talk, whether it be 3 technique, 5 technique, 9 technique, or just the forces that you feel when you are in the middle of a game or practice, and just I can remember when I got my first car crash. It was after college, and I was hit by another car. I think we were probably going 45 miles an hour, and when I got hit and I realized what had happened, I was like, that felt exactly like a football play. But we talk about those forces. You talk about training camp, and just after that first, you kind of wonder about why am I so down on fall camp or training camp, and then you go through that first practice and you're just helmets and shell, not even shells, just helmets, no shoulder pads, no football pants, and then you wake up the next day and you feel the soreness, even though you're not hitting, that hard, you're still hitting each other, whether you got pads on or not. You wake up, you're like, okay, this is why I'm kind of dreading training camp or fall camp. But like,
Right.
then that's just kind of the way that you felt the rest of the season, but you just got used to it,
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
those little like connections that I had with the players, just being able to
Right.
talk those over.
Right. And did those connections make them more receptive when you were giving nutrition information or making suggestions in terms of their diet?
I think so. Especially like later on in my career. Like at first in my career, it was all about, making those connections, and I don't think they realized how young I was, because again, I still looked older than than what I actually was, but once I'm able to communicate the information, so like if I'm able to talk nutrition with you, as long as I'm just staying one step ahead and I'm not 2 or 3 or 10 steps ahead of them, they're gonna still tune into what you say. So if they can understand you, they'll stay with you and come back to you, and then you start building that relationship. But if you're just talking, and using terms and vocabulary that they have no idea what you're talking about, they're they're not going to come back to you. They're not going to ask you any more questions because I can't understand you, dude. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so there is that as well, and I think there's more to it as well. Like I said before, I feel like I can talk with anybody. I can talk
Yeah.
anybody's ear off. I can. I don't know. I get along with everybody, so I think there's that as well, and I enjoy people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how you get those, you throw those tokens out there, and they're a little bit more comfortable with you.
Yeah, sure. And I guess in terms of the communication point, you mentioned speaking in terms that could be understood or conveying information in a digestible way so that the athletes would come back to you. Or were there other elements of effective communication that were important in your work?
I think not just communication. It was the fact that I think there's this misconception about like dietitians, and maybe from players or other sports performance practitioners. The dietitians are sitting in their office and they're just waiting to conduct diet recalls and construct plans and create plans for you to hand them a piece of paper, a meal plan, saying, okay, go out and do this. And that wasn't my style. Like I said before, I was a team dietitian. I was a strength coach, and so I was able to be. And I was lucky to have a training table too. So I was able to be at the training table and in the weight room. So they saw me in not only 2 different areas, but they saw me on the field. So I was the water boy. They saw me in the locker room because I would be, hauling in pre and post practice nutrition. I was traveling with them. I was on the plane. I was in the hotel. And so I was everywhere. And so I always say, like, rubbing elbows with these athletes is basically what we do. And it's not always, you're not always going to be having conversations with them about nutrition, nor do they want to, but having that true relationship with these athletes. And then like kind of sprinkled in there, in between, they're going to have questions about nutrition, or like, hey, Kev, you mind if I sit down with you and we go over my plan? Or, I always joke around too, and this has happened before. Like you could be in a fourth quarter of a game in the huddle, and someone will have a nutrition question for you, literally in the huddle.
Yeah.
So it's like those, you have those consultations anywhere.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think that's in terms of the communication aspect, like being available. and being around and not just in one spot is going to make you far more effective.
Yeah.
And just like being amongst them,
Right. Right.
your clients, basically.
Yeah, you're a part of the mix, it sounds like, very much, rather than just, someone, as you said, sitting in their office that they would go to, but involved in multiple interactions, as a strength and coach, but also in your role as a dietitian. And I'm wondering, to what extent, I appreciate that maybe your role with the Buccaneers wasn't specifically injury related, but I imagine, given that you had those relationships and those multiple interactions, what kinds of things did you see or hear in terms of athletes and how they dealt with the mental side of injury?
Yeah. I'd say throughout my 9 years, I tried to be, again, going back to being everywhere, but being there, being everywhere for everybody. And a lot of times you'll get, the front in terms of, someone may be having, a bad day, and it could be injury, non-injury, whatever it may be. And you wouldn't necessarily know it. Well, on the other hand, there may be others that are just like, they wear their heart on their sleeve, and they're just super emotional and they can't hide anything. And so that was kind of the thing where you really had to, in your relationship with them, you really had to know who those individuals were, who were the explicits, and then who were more like the implicits, and introverts and extroverts. And so I think it was more my third year, where I began to realize with a specific athlete that, like, this guy, because I knew this guy, coming in as a rookie, and he sustained an injury, and like everything, when he came in as a rookie, it was like he came in sort of as a guy that he's sort of a no-namer, but then he blossomed during his rookie year, and then his second or third year, he sustained an injury.
Yeah.
And it was something where I could kind of see a change in him, and he wasn't altogether there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was never an extrovert necessarily, but he definitely, I can't really explain it. It was facial expressions there. If it was just like the lack of attention that he had, during conversation, it just wasn't all there. And so that was kind of like when I think about kind of what I've been through as an athlete and even as a practitioner, like I think about him and what he could have been thinking. I have no idea. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was too insensitive. I don't know, but that's essentially who I think about. And I think stemming from that, I became a little bit more sensitive to it. And kind of a little bit more like, hey, how you doing, man? Like, are you doing all right? How's everything going with your rehab? Just being more in tune, sparking up conversation, even if it's just like, man, even if it's just like a simple hello, hey, how you doing? Like, because they could feel like nobody cares about me. Like I'm just like old news. I'm just used. I'm old news. So I became a little bit more sensitive to that. Knowing like even my mentality as an athlete. It's like, shoot, like he's an NFL athlete. He's an NFL player. He's a well-known NFL player, but he's a human being.
Right. Right.
So
without, I guess, trying to generalize, would that be a sentiment amongst maybe injured athletes that you witnessed or encountered where players would be, they feel not cared about or discarded in some way?
Oh, I don't doubt that at all. I think that, there's sort of this like next man up mentality.
Mm-hmm.
It's and I think sometimes coaches do that. Even practitioners do that, and don't realize it. Um, because it's just one of those, like I said before, they have a lot of pressure, outside pressure, from, it could be owners, general managers, fans, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. But like, gosh, man, if you're a coach or a head coach, it's like you better produce, just like a player. Like, if you're not doing well, then you know you could be snipped in a second.
Right, right.
So I think, as far as the players are concerned, I think there's coaches who are really, really good at um, being genuine and like checking in with players. But I get it, like everyone's got a bandwidth, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone's got pressure. But I think if you have a true relationship with your athletes, if I go back to way back, like with all the coaches that I've had throughout the years, and the ones that I had like a true relationship with. And I stumbled across upon this like a couple months ago. But the coaches that I had a true relationship, short of my dad when he was my baseball coach, um, it was very minimal. I didn't have a relationship with my high school coach. I didn't have a relationship with my college coach. I didn't have any sort of relationship with, like, when I was on staff, even with as a practitioner. I think some of that carried over, like from being an athlete into being a practitioner. But that's like a totally different story. But like the one true like relationship that I had with my coach was actually my high school strength coach. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
was actually in my wedding when I got married. I mean, like, he's like the brother I never had,
Yeah.
and so I think unfortunately, I think some coaches get into sports for the wrong reason, and it
Mm-hmm.
shows. I think and I heard this the other day, that like one of the coaches got into coaching, and this was Coach Krzyzewski, who was on the Today Show one day. He's like, I got into it so I could have relationships with these student athletes. And like, that to me was just like, well, that's probably why you're such a great coach.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be skeptic about this or pessimistic about this, but I think it's pretty minimal today
Mm-hmm.
in terms of why coaches are getting into coaching.
Yeah.
I think the first thing is be wanting to create relationships with athletes, and teach athletes
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
a different perspective.
Right. Right. And you mentioned that sometimes I guess the coaches or the whole staff and the players, everyone has certain pressures and constraints that they're operating under. And earlier in our conversation, you indicated that when you were hired, that you were told in no explicit term, or told in explicit terms, that you probably wouldn't be around for too long, and yet you were there for 9 years. So what do you think may have contributed to your longevity with the team?
um, I'll never know the answer to that question. I don't know. It's kind of like one of those. I think one of a good friend of mine, one of the scouts, after the after the first go around, like, because I've been through 5 head coaches in my time with the Bucs. And I remember one of the scouts saying to me, this is when I was in the weight room at the time. He's like, well, someone put the lamb's blood over your door. because they passed you by. And I was like, yeah, I got lucky this time. But when it happened the second time, the third time, the fourth time, it was like, okay, I mean, I don't know, maybe I had some sort of a halo around me that, ownership saying like, you can fire everybody, but don't fire that guy.
Mm.
Or if it was truly because I was good at my job. I'd like to think the latter, but I kind of went through every season just like, I when it came down to changing of the guard, I think my wife was more worried about it than I ever was.
Yeah.
It wasn't stressful for me at all, and I didn't have fear. I never had. So I'd have fear and failure, and like as an athlete, but I never had fear in that. I never feared failure, and never feared being fired in the
Yeah.
NFL.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad
Yeah.
thing, but
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean that was again, like you said before, like that's what my first boss said, like, first year you could be gone, but at least it's a
Right.
resume builder. And then 9 years later, I left on my own account.
Yeah. And prior to the start of our conversation, you had mentioned that the injury that you've had now, which I'm curious to talk more about, contributed to your departure.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can just talk about what's happened with your current injury and yeah.
Yeah. So this injury has changed my life. At first, I thought it was for the worst, but it turned out it's the complete opposite. But and it hasn't been like all sunshine and roses. Obviously, it's I'm here. I've grown from this, and I think we've all grown in the last year from COVID and that battle. But so 3 years ago, in 2018, this is February 2018, for whatever reason, I think there's the spiritual aspect that I have developed, and the spiritual perspective that I have developed on why this has happened to me. But I sustained, or I should say, re-sustained my cartilage injury that I had originally had in 2006 when I was playing football. And so from that injury, I had a microfracture surgery, right? And that was something to where the doctor went in. We knew that I was gonna get scoped. This is back in 2000. This is from the 2006 season, but in 2007, I had the surgery. He goes, listen, if we got to do anything, like if I find anything in there, I'm going to operate on it. I was like, yeah, okay, fine. And, went through anesthesia, woke up, and, at that time, like when you come out of anesthesia, like, I think you've had surgery, so, and you know what anesthesia is like, but you're not all together there, so you can't really remember a whole lot. And specifically, like the discharge instructions that the doctor gave you, and
Right.
I remember, like, hey, you just had a microfracture surgery. It's a major surgery, so stay off of it for 6 weeks and be on crutches. I was like, all right, let's go to, let's go hit up the Chinese buffet. And, I was starving, I've been fasting and because of the anesthesia. So I went, got something to eat, went home, and like woke up the next morning, crutched into the athletic, to the training room. And I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say, like things weren't communicated that needed to be communicated. And I guess me being the ignorant athlete that I was, I didn't realize the extent and how serious the surgery that I had was. And so instead of being on crutches for 6 weeks, I was on crutches for 3 days and back to running and squatting and doing all that stuff. And it wasn't getting better, for some reason it wasn't getting better. And so I called the doctor and I was like, listen, I don't know, like, if it's supposed to be like this or whatever. And he's like, all right, why don't you meet me at the arena was going to go check on the basketball team at the time. He was like, meet me in the locker room. So I met him in the locker room. I walked in and he was like, why are you not on crutches? And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. So, and I don't really want to get into that, but like that just kind of, leads into my story now to I had a microfracture surgery. I didn't realize it when I was in college. I didn't even realize what a microfracture surgery was until 2018. And again, for whatever reason, I just blame myself for not making myself aware. But throughout the 11 years, basically, I went from 2007 to 2018. I was running marathons. I ran 2 marathons. I did a couple of half marathons. I was doing triathlons. I did lifting meets. I was bodybuilding. I was doing all this stuff. And I just put a lot of wear and tear onto the fiber cartilage. It's never going to be cartilage that's like your God-given cartilage, but I just abused my body, for 11 years. Even as a practitioner, I just was so hardcore into lifting and like I said, just doing whatever extreme thing I could do. I wanted to do an Ironman competition. And so I don't know, maybe there was just something from, being an athlete and not necessarily fulfilling what I wanted to fulfill in college, but I was gonna, do something now. So anyway, I sustained an injury. It was actually, quite honestly, just, I was pressure washing my deck and I twisted on it and I felt something. And I was like, oh, I'll just shake it off. It'll be fine. Next day, it swelled up. Next day after that, continued to swell up. Day after that, still hurt. And it wasn't until like a month later, I was like, okay, something's wrong. And I got a scope done in June of that year. I had Synvisc injections, which I was one of the few small percentage of people that did not react well to Synvisc injections. I was on heavy prescription anti-inflammatories. I was going through physical therapy. It came along after the 2018 season where I started to get bone marrow aspirate concentration injections, or BMAC injections, which are kind of like a stem cell type of therapy. They were injecting that into my knee. PRP, more physical therapy. I did those shots. I did the BMAC and the PRP shots for 2 years. I was doing supplements, like I was doing the collagen vitamin C supplementation. I did that for over a year. And it was just one of those things where I was doing sports massages. I was doing acupuncture. I was doing anything that I could possibly to get rid of the pain, and to kind of paint a picture of what I recently had been going through is, imagine when you are walking, right? We take walking for granted.
Yeah.
Like I took walking for granted.
Yeah.
Imagine having to be conscious of every single step that you take.
Yeah.
To make sure that it's the right one.
Yeah.
That's what I did for 3 years. And it'll drive you crazy, and comparing myself, like, am I walking the wrong way? Am I walking differently? I was looking at other people that were walking. Like, do I have too much bend in my knee? Do I not heel strike the right way? Am I not extending my hip, in the stance fit? Like, I mean, I was analyzing everything, and it put me into a really, really dark place. And it was my identity. The two things that I talk about is, when I share the story, is like, my identity back then, for 9 years, was in my job, and my physical health. Like,
Yeah.
those were the two things that were like, that was my identity. That's who I was. Like, I wasn't a husband. I wasn't an uncle. I wasn't a son. Like, I was like, I'm a sports dietitian for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And not only that, and this sounds a little pretentious, or may sound like a little self-centered and high and, really, really high on myself, but like I'm good at it and I look the part. And from a physical health standpoint, from like an aesthetic standpoint, it's like, and that's hard for me to verbalize, because that's kind of deep down inside, like that's kind of how I felt, right? And when those so the physical part was taken away from me, like I tell everyone to this day, like God took me out by the knees, right? And
Yeah.
and that led, it was going on for so long. I remember still even traveling with the team, and when I had the Synvisc injections, and I'm sure, like, looking back on it, it's kind of funny because it's so ridiculous, but I remember getting off the plane. I couldn't bend my knee and I couldn't straighten it out. And I'm literally trying to get off the plane. Like, you don't go through it like I can't remember the name, the
Like the
jetway or anything,
jet
but you go
bridge.
down onto the actual ground and
Right.
get
The
into the
tarmac.
bus. And like, I'm hanging on to the railing going down the stairs because I literally could not walk. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get through today or the rest of the season. I don't know how I'm going to get, like, at the time I was 33. And again, these like voices, these thoughts come into your head. Like, I'm 33 years old and I'm walking or I'm not walking, number one, but I have the right knee of a 85-year-old or whatever age,
Yeah.
Um, and it really, like, that's when I just started to go into the downward spiral. And
Mm.
that was on my birthday. I turned 33. No, excuse me, I turned 34 that day, and I was actually meeting my parents. They were going to meet me at the team hotel, and I didn't tell my mom or my dad, what I was going through. And I remember, like, seeing my mom and dad, and like, I'm pretty sure my mom's downstairs right now because she's taking care of me because I'm injured. But
Mm.
I remember her, like, started to tear up, and like it was pretty bad. And that was probably, like, physically the lowest point in my career. But the mental side was far worse, and it got worse as the season was going on.
Yeah. How did you, I guess, deal with the fact that, those two things that were important to you in terms of your identity with your job, your identity being tied to your job and your role with the Buccaneers, and also your physical fitness as being an important part of who you were? I guess, how did you deal with those two things being so adversely affected or impacted?
You know, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, um, for me, it was one of those things where I relied on myself for everything. Like, when it came to my job, like, I never had an intern. Um, and well, coincidentally, until my last year, of being with the Bucs. And thank God I had an intern that year, because I couldn't have done um, at least half the things that I would do otherwise. And there was like, when you're in the NFL, like when you're a practitioner, if you're a strength coach, if you're an athletic trainer, if you're a coach, like, you have to be on your feet. And for me, it was a matter of, like, I'm a one-man show, so I have to not only be here for players, but even behind the scenes, I gotta unload the product off the dock. I gotta stock the shelves. I gotta stock the fridges. If the kitchen needed help, I needed to run over there and, like, do back of house work in the front of the line. If the weight room needed me, to spot a guy, or coach technique, I was in the weight room. So it was, and not to mention travel. And it's 7 days a week when you're in the season, so there's no rest. And I think my realization was, I can't do it on my own. Like, I think at that point I don't know if I was willing to say those days are done, but at least temporarily I can't do it. So I relied on other people,
Yeah.
which was a huge, like, huge dagger on my pride. Like I was very, I took a lot of pride in the fact that like I didn't have an intern for years. And, you know, so then the other part was, conversation, you know, talking about it. Like it was, looking back on it, I never really talked about it with, like my supervisor, or I didn't really delve into like the deepness of it all, like all of the in-depth details, mentally and emotionally, with my colleagues. It was my wife, that, and my best friend actually, and my father-in-law, that I mean, I talked to my best friend, his best man in my wedding. I talked to him literally every day for about a year and a half, just kind of like talking me off the ledge. My wife was the same way. Like, some of the wisest things that I've ever heard have come from her.
Mhm.
And so, and she was the one that was telling me, in these conversations that I was having, that like whatever I was thinking, um, whatever devastation I was feeling, whatever, man, whatever terrible thoughts I was having. I get a little choked up talking about this, but like, they're all lies, you know, uh, whoever they're coming from, or if they're just coming from that voice inside you, like they're all lies, and, um, the other thing was like, this is a very deep valley. Um, Life is, a roller coaster, but it's about peaks and valleys, as we've all heard. But the thing that stood out to me in my mind is like, we don't really grow from the peaks. Like when we're on the peaks, they don't have the rich soil. Instead of, most likely they don't even have the trees on the peaks, right? There's not enough soil, there's not enough oxygen, precipitation, what have you. But
Right.
it's the valleys that have the richest soil and the oxygen, and they are watered down by the rain. And that's where you grow the most. And so I
Right.
was like, okay, that's good to hear. But when am I gonna get to the peak again?
Yeah.
Like, I'm willing to learn anything from this, but it was like I had no end in sight. Like, to me, it was, what the mental part of it for me was that, is this going to be forever? And
Is
if
is
that's
is
so,
what going to be forever?
the pain, the chronic pain, the me, the part of me that was consciously, in terms of like the defense mechanism that I had developed, in being conscious of every single step that I took. Like, am I going to be like this forever? Am I going to walk like this forever? And then, like, there's the whole overcompensation side of it, where my left knee started to hurt. My right knee was the bad knee, but then my left knee started to hurt. Um, and then I started to develop plantar fasciitis in both of my feet. And it was a cascade of, from an injury to more pain, and it was like, man, and this is all during the football season, and my last year. And I was just like, that kind of played into like that whole, um um I don't even know what to call it. It's just you get into that mindset of like, of doubt, and like there's no hope, and this is going to be forever, and this is kind of, these are the cards that you're being dealt. And that was a very, 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 very dark time in my life.
Were you able, I guess physically, were there signs to people around you, your peers or colleagues, that you were physically disabled or that you were experiencing chronic pain, or did you just manage in some ways to hide that?
Oh yeah, I mean, people knew. um you know my office, at the time that I sustained the injury, was in the athletic training room. I had moved from the weight room to the athletic training room. And it's kind of funny because, like, what better place to be when you're going through pain and an injury to be an athlete, a professional NFL athletic training room. You've got all the bells and whistles that you need right there in terms of managing the pain. And when everyone, when all the players were gone, I'd get on the game ready, the ice machine. I'd go in the cold tub. I'd try to numb the pain. I'd get on the Normatec, try to flush out all the inflammation, all the swelling. It was there was so many things that I did. And I don't recall exactly, but I'm sure they could probably tell in my face that I was going through some pain just by the way that I walked too. You know, Again, this is something that I had so many friends, real good friends. Like I had, you know, some of the best friends that still to this day that I had on that staff. They would kind of poke fun at me, like, "Hey man, you're walking like an 80-year-old man," and I was like, but like I hated hearing that, hated it, and so people knew though, like again, I don't know how explicit I was with it. I might have been like, kind of like, some days I just got to like yell at some people, or not yell at some people, but just like voice that, hey, I'm in pain. And then there may be some days that I'm trying to hide it and trying to like, suck it up, that old athlete mentality,
Yeah.
and try to hide it. But I don't think I was very good at that. Like I couldn't hide it from the way that I was walking.
Right. And you mentioned lies earlier. Were these lies you were telling yourself, or maybe you can expand or
Yeah.
explain
So
that point?
my wife was the first one that mentioned that to me. It's like, I think we all have, I think we belong to, just human beings in general. I think each and every one of us in some way belong to a club, and I call it the imposter syndrome club. And I think we all have these like, and when you're an imposter, like, or if, let's say for instance you're diagnosed, and you would know more about this than me, but like if someone said you have imposter syndrome, you're constantly like being pessimistic about yourself or doubting yourself, or what I
Mhm.
say are probably not true about yourself. Like if you're looking from an outsider's perspective,
Yeah.
and you tell them kind of what you're thinking, they would be like, "Really, dude? Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. Like that like you're lying to yourself, man. Like that you should not be thinking that. That's far from the truth."
Right.
And so that's kind of what I mean when I talk about like the lies, because I think those, it may start as like a simple little thought, like a little seed of thought, and then it can kind of branch out into something completely like beyond what you ever thought it would be, like subtly too. And
Yeah.
like for me, it was like relying on my identities, like I talked about before, what I identified myself as let me down. Like my physical self, and because of my physical self couldn't keep up with the daily responsibilities of my job, um, you know, I was pretty much forced to find another line of work, right? 'Cause I couldn't do it, like I could not do it. Um, and with that came that, again, that failure, and that label as being a failure. And with that, like if you tell somebody that, like, yeah, I'm a failure, like you're lying, like that's far from the truth. Like, so those little subtleties can really take over.
Yeah.
And you know I I think in the athletic realm, in the sports realm, my mindset, again, I talk about these subtleties. I did, like in the athletic realm, as an athlete, you don't want to ever be labeled as average, right? You don't want to be good. You want to be great, right? And for some, you want to be uh, elite. Like a small percentage of people that can call themselves elite.
Yeah.
But it got to the point for me, for whatever reason, if I just wanted to redeem myself from my college days or whatever, I wanted to be legendary. Like, screw all that other stuff.
Yeah.
I want to be legendary. And I could go into more depth about that, but it's like I wanted a ring, a Super Bowl ring. That way it's like it was kind of like my ticket to immortality. Like I could hand that down to my kids, to
Right.
their kids and generations to come. So that was my mindset. So like that athletic mindset, it can be good. It can be that small seed, but it can branch off into something that you don't want it to be, and it can be very, very toxic.
Yeah.
And so there you have to be able to realize that and to be able to navigate that.
How does one do that? How does one, I guess, realize the benefits of athletic pursuits and aspiring to athletic achievement, but also not letting the toxic potential take over?
I mean, I realized it myself. It's like when it became all about me, and um, you know, and I don't know the right word for it, but it was so self-centric and egotistical that it was like it was toxic in and of itself. So it was like that realization is when I first came on board with the Bucs, I was there for the guys, I was there for the players, and it slowly over time became about making the playoffs, winning, making the playoffs, getting to the Super Bowl, getting a ring. Um, which is it's funny because a couple years later, then they end up winning the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
But um, but it was that realization. It was like I was in it all for me, and it made me sad when I realized that like it wasn't about the relationships anymore. I was in it for the hardware, and I was in it, like I said, I was in it. I wasn't even in it for the money, really. Like I was in it for just that trying to achieve that legendary status. I mean, and
Right.
at that point, I'd gone back to school. I'd got my master's, but I don't want my master's. I wanted a PhD. I wanted a PhD because I wanted to be the best. There was no PhDs at the time that were dietitians or strength coaches like in the league at the time. So that was a way for me to distinguish myself. So you can kind of get um, my point here is that the things that are supposed to be good, like education, and like helping your team to get to the playoffs and win and get to it became very toxic. And that realization in and of itself was like, no, it's not about me. And having those conversations, like I said before, like the conversations really helped me in the fact that it was like, listening to other people, and you may have been so focused on your own problems and what you were going through that like you didn't realize, wow, this person was going through that, or my best friend was going through that, or my sister was going through that. Like it's everyone's going through something. And
Right.
like just listen, and having those, again, I go back to having those conversations on the phone, not through text, like old
Yeah.
fashioned like phone
Right.
conversations,
Right.
really, really helped me. And my realization of like, okay, I got to get back to like developing those relationships and focusing on other people.
Yeah. I was
Um,
going to ask you, Kevin, how you came to the realization that, your focus had shifted from the relationships to more of those
yeah.
external things.
And I know this isn't the point of this podcast, but I
Sure.
became a
We can,
Christian.
yeah. I like just the conversation is great wherever it goes.
Yeah. I mean, I like I'd say the number one thing that happened to me is I became a Christian, and I relied on my spiritual self, and like there were so many things that revealed to me through the Lord that he changed me. So I will say that first and foremost. Like, it wasn't something I stumbled across myself. I think it was, conversations that I was having through other people. You want to call it divine inspiration or whatever. It was, I was heavily into scripture. At first, I was trying to just find answers for myself. Again, focused on the self.
Right.
But then it became more about, okay, a higher purpose.
Right.
What am I really on this earth to do? And it's not to get my PhD, to say, just to be able to call me Dr. Luhrs. It's not getting in the ring just to be able to go back to my hometown and go to a bar and just say, hey, I'll take another beer and flash the ring.
Right.
It's to grow in relationships, for the betterment of others,
Yeah.
in using the talents that God gave me.
Yeah.
And that's honestly, that's been my mission. And I wrote that down, and this was something that I stumbled across, this like revelation, a few months ago, that you know I was, and it wasn't overnight. It's been 3 years of especially in this time of going through this pandemic. I always say that I used to be a caterpillar. Now I've been in this cocoon for 16 months, going on 16 months now, because we still aren't back in the lab at GSSI. I've been working from home for 16 months.
Right.
I'm waiting to, once I get over this injury, because I have faith that I will. And once we go back to the lab, I know I'm going to bust out like a butterfly. So, but with a different, I tell people that people are going to feel me in a different way.
Yeah. So I'm curious about kind of this chronic pain that you've experienced, and you talked earlier about feeling despair, lack of hope. Maybe you can just elaborate on
Yeah.
the impact that the chronic pain has had on you, and,
Yeah.
and maybe what contributes to a sense of hopefulness.
Yeah. So at the deepest, darkest moments, throughout these last 3 years, I'd be lying if I told you that I didn't have thoughts of suicide. And that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions I think that there is that, like, even a guy like me, who had to me, I had like the perfect childhood. Like, I had, two parents. I had a mom and a dad. My mom, she was a homemaker. She stayed at home with us, and cooked all the meals, and made sure we did our homework, and drove us to practices and whatnot. So I had a great upbringing. I had the best parents, and the best family life. And then I was blessed with all of these gifts, and from academics to athletics, and friends. And so anyway, blessed with so many things, that, like, again, we go back to talking about the lies. I just say, like, I had some demons in me that were constantly in my head, that were saying, like, you can't do this. Like, you're not going to make it through this. Like, you're not strong enough. And not only that, but, like, when you get to the point of where you start to fill yourself with that lie of, like, nobody cares, is kind of probably when you reach the lowest moments.
Hmm.
So I mean, I remember, saying some of this stuff to my wife, and we were at a restaurant, and I'm in pain, just sitting there, and I'm in tears, you know,
Yeah.
and like you said, it's all about hope. You know, it's about it's about again, going back to the conversations, I feel like being able to relate to or people to be able to relate to you and you to relate to them in some way. I was trying to reach out, like I was Googling, like, was there any support groups that I could be involved with. You know, at one point I remember I had hit the wall and I had like a nervous breakdown, and um, I sought mental therapy, you know, and so you know, luckily, like you know, with PepsiCo, like it was one of those things where like they take that seriously, and they'll help you out, and so they um you know, I sought help with my therapist, and you know, like at first it was like, you know, once a week, and then it started to become a little bit more sporadic to where I still want to stay on top of like the mental side of things. um but to me it's like I have a lot of hope right now, um in the fact that like I've gone through this procedure, I'm going through the rehab right now. I have faith that this will be the last one, and this will be the final one. But what if it isn't? You know, and there's always that thought, and I'm like, well, how do I prepare myself for that? And I
Yeah.
haven't reached that point yet. Um, but I think it's like with every single, like I have a laundry list of things that I named off some of them. I have a laundry list of things that I have done to try and battle this throughout the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, from physical therapy to the shots and to the surgeries and whatnot. And there was hope in every single one of those things. And
Yeah.
so like when I kind of lost sight of like, okay, well, what's the next thing? Then I kind of start kind of going back into those, like some of those old thoughts and those dark places, which to me, like, um, you're never going to be totally freed of that. Like
Yeah.
you're going to have to battle those. But
Right.
with the mental therapy, it's like, what are some of the ways in which to do so, and what are maybe some deeper issues that are kind of stemming from or causing this, you know, like other than the physical pain. So
Right. And
um
where is your physical pain at the moment?
so at the moment, so I it's not bad, just short answer, it's not bad. I you know, when I first had the surgery, it was like a screwdriver, you know, being just kind of ground in through the knee, um, on top of, you know, the inflammation, the swelling,
You mean,
and
is this
so
the microfracture surgery or the most recent?
so the most recent, yeah, I'm talking about the most recent. Uh, the um, the most recent surgery I had was called a Macy procedure,
Uh-huh.
which is relatively new. And I don't know if you know anything about it, but essentially what they do, um, and I don't want to botch it's an acronym. And it's a matrix induced uh, autologous. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Autologous chondrocyte implantation. So MACI, MACI. And essentially what they do is it's two procedures. The first one is a scope biopsy. So they go in, you know, you go through general anesthesia, and they go in the endoscopy, and they take out some little small pieces of cartilage, and they take that cartilage and those chondrocytes, and they ship them to a lab, and they grow those cells into new cartilage, and they grow it on like this little again, I can't remember the name of the term, but they put it on a little sheet, right, and they grow it and they send it back to the surgeon, and essentially the surgeon opens you up in that second procedure, and he gets, you know, um, firsthand view of what those lesions look like. And when they opened me up, they not only found one, and not two, but three bone on bone lesions in my right knee. even though I had good joint spacing in my x-rays, I don't have like full-fledged arthritis. I just had arthritis in those spots. I was causing a lot of pain, like if you can imagine being bone on bone.
Yeah.
And so they opened me up, like I said before, in that second procedure, and they just carve out the cartilage to fit it exactly into those little like holes in your cartilage, those lesions. They glue it on there. Actually, they glue it onto the bone, and then I think they may do a little bit of PRP. Some in some of those procedures, some may not, but then they sew you back up, and they slap a brace on you and they say, don't walk on it for 6 weeks. And the rehab is pretty extensive. And so in terms of, back to your question on my pain is about where it was before the procedure, like in terms of like sitting and I can't stand on it, but sitting and laying around, if I lay around, for an extensive period of time, then it gets a little achy. But
Yeah.
I'm in a continuous passive motion machine for 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, it helps too. Like, in terms of like the pain and the aching, because it's constantly moving and I don't have to, I'm just sitting there. I'm working from home, or
Yeah.
I'm watching TV, and it's just moving my knee and flexing my knee
Right.
up and
Right.
down. So it's not bad right now. So
Right.
that's a blessing.
Yeah.
I take it day by day, and I definitely enjoy the
Yeah.
painless days.
Um, Earlier when we were speaking, Kevin, you mentioned that it sounded like in 2006 when you were told you would have you would have this microfracture operation or surgery, that it didn't sound like you appreciated the severity of it. Would that be correct?
Oh, I didn't. I had no idea. I had
Yeah.
no idea the severity of it. Even though, again, I'd say, the doctor told me when I was in the recovery room. Apparently, he told me this, that I did have a major procedure, to be on crutches for 6 weeks. I, quite honestly, I could have walked out of that room. Like I mean, I was coming off of anesthesia. I probably couldn't feel a thing, but like the next day I could have walked on it. Right. I didn't have a whole lot of pain in that whole thing. And it was kind of a thing where it's like, okay, wait, did he tell me to be on crutches for 6 weeks? Like, but I'm able to walk. Like, what's so,
Right.
you know, and again, I don't want to get too deep into that, into the particulars of that. Just, I respect a lot of the people at Nebraska, and I think there was just a miscommunication.
Sure. But
But
maybe
go ahead.
you could. Oh no, you go ahead. Sorry.
I was just, yeah, I was just ending on that.
Yeah. So I was curious though, in terms of, not specific to the interactions that you had at Nebraska, but just more broadly, if you could comment on the relevance or potential importance of patients or athletes getting education and knowledge or information about the nature of their injury, about the process that's about to unfold, or the protocols, recovery regimens, the relevance of that in terms of their mindset or their motivation for recovery.
Yeah. I mean, and I think I'm understanding the question right, but like in terms of just the overall education, it's not just like obviously the physical part of it is very important, like physical therapy and being comfortable with your team, actually, like, because it's a team approach when it comes to this sort of thing, especially like with like major surgeries. I mean, if you've had an ACL surgery, like it's not only just the surgeon, but you have to have the physical therapist. You have to have their team. Everyone has to be on the same page. There could be mental, like we said, we're talking about the mental side of it. Like I would definitely invest into a mental health expert, for sure, because it's one of those things where you don't want to be caught off guard. Because when you wake up and you look down and you see your knee, or you look over, you see your shoulder or your foot or whatever it is that you had operated on, or whatever, like it may even not even be an injury, or a surgery. It just be an injury that you haven't had operated on. Like, you want to make sure that you stay ahead of it. Because the mental, I don't care how tough you are, there's going to be a mental component. And I think that you have to be ready for that. And so I think, overall, in general, I think you have to be comfortable with the team that is around you. Like for me on this time around, I essentially shopped for physical therapists. I wanted, like, there aren't many that have rehabbed a Macy procedure before beginning, because it's relatively new. And so it wasn't like a deterrent for me necessarily. I just wanted to be comfortable with the physical therapist, and so I definitely have a good one this time around. And from the mental side of it, like, I have a lot of hope right now in terms of the outcome and the prognosis of this knee, that, like, my sessions with my mental therapist are few and far between, but that's not to say I won't ever see her again. That's quite the opposite, because I like I said before, you want to stay ahead of it, even when things are going well. It can turn like that,
Right.
for whatever reason. And
When
so, yeah, I think from an educational standpoint, don't be afraid to be very picky, and don't be afraid to ask as many questions as you can. Because, like, for me, it was kind of like, in college, I was a little naive, and I wasn't asking the questions that I probably should have, and relying on them, and like, oh, they talk, they communicate with each other, and there are still are mistakes and mix-ups that can be made. Like for me, it was, my people had a miscommunication, but I'm not going to go back and sue them for that. It's just kind of how things go. And so, ask questions, get as much education, be as informed as you can be around what you're having. Like, first of all, the injury that you have, the procedures that are available, the doctors that are able to perform those surgeries, what your different options are, like second opinions, third opinions, 10th opinion, whatever it is. Be like, because you only get one body
yeah,
for the rest of your life. So be very picky with that, and don't just focus on the physical part of it. Focus on the mental and emotional part of it too, and surround yourself too from a social aspect with friends and family, and talk about it. Like, don't just bury it deep down inside of you. Talk about it with people.
yeah. You may have kind of just answered two of my close to final questions, but I was going to ask, what kinds of questions should athletes who get an injury be asking about?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's kind of a thing where, I think I'm all about vibes too. Like, you kind of like feel the vibes of some doctors. Like, um, you know, some will be quick to go in with the knife, and then others will be like, well, what have you done up to this point? So give me a full background. And so I think, giving them and getting back the full picture of, like, all of the options. Have I exhausted them all? In my case, over 3 years, yes. Like I said, I have a laundry list of things that I've done, to the point where when I went to this doctor for the Macy procedure, like, he was just like, okay, sounds like you'd be a good candidate for the Macy procedure. But then when he said that, I was like, hey, okay, what is that? So I had my phone out, and I'm like, I use that little notepad
Yeah,
app in the phone, and I write everything. I have my questions all laid out. I write in my little notepad the answers. I got my wife on the other line on the phone listening in, because I'm forgetful. Like she's got an auditory, like she's like a voice recorder.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and asking just like some people might be good with the high level information, but I'm all about the details, because it would have been my fourth and fifth procedure at this point. I'm like, I want to make sure that this is the best possible option.
Yeah.
And so, focusing on, okay, what is the procedure going to entail? Okay, how many weeks in between both procedures? What does Macy mean? Like,
Yeah.
what are we looking at from a recovery standpoint? How much physical therapy will I need? And so, have there been success stories? I went as far, me being with GSSI, and I wouldn't call myself, I think it's pretty far-fetched to call me a scientist, but but I look up the research, and I'm not talking about just Google an article that someone wrote in their editorial commentary. I'm talking about looking at like the peer-reviewed research, and I
Yeah.
found some good articles that were really promising. And I don't expect everyone to do that, but if I would push you to do that. Maybe have somebody, if you can find some peer-reviewed research, and of a health practitioner, a doctor, or someone in the medical field, just to kind of spell it out for you. I would do that. I would fully investigate all you can, as the client, as the athlete,
Yeah.
at me as a practitioner, but to gather all of the information.
Right. How does that knowledge or information help you, or how has it helped you?
Well, so it kind of sets my expectations, and but at the same time, I know that everyone's different. Like, there may be a physical rehab protocol in place, but not everybody's going to fit into that perfect. Okay, week 1 you're going to be doing this. Week 2 you're going to be doing this. You may be the type of person that kind of blows through everything very quickly, or you may be a little bit slower. And it's not saying anything about you as a person, so don't take it personally. It's just how your body heals, right? And
Yeah.
so there's already been like some pivots with me to where, when they opened me up and they saw that I had 3 lesions. I mean, they had a pretty good idea that I had 2 lesions, and the patellofemoral lesion, behind my kneecap, was by far the worst one. But then they opened me up and they found a 3rd lesion. They're like, okay. They told me over the phone like that night, like, we found a 3rd one, so like we feel good about it. We had enough of the new cartilage to put in to that lesion, so we feel like it was a successful surgery. And for that, there's 2 different protocols with the surgery. They're like, you have to there's a conservative side on range of motion, and there's a conservative side on weight bearing. Well, I have to be conservative on both.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, to me, like, you can't set yourself in like, this is the way it's going to go. You
Right.
have to be, in setting your expectations, you also have to expect to have to adapt
Yeah.
and pivot.
Yeah.
So that's really important.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, because I know for lots of injured athletes that those expectations, once they hear certain timelines, and you mentioned earlier sort of that it was with your football career, the goal is always to get back sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Right. And sort of, if they say 4 weeks, I'm going to get back in 3 weeks, or
Yeah.
right. And so the expectation is as soon as one hears that time frame in their mind, that's like, okay, well, I'm going to beat it, or that's my new sport, that's my goal. And so the expectation can be a bit of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, motivating, but on the other hand, can, I suppose, lead to frustration or distress if the expectation goes unmet.
Right. And I tell my doctors and my PT, it's like, listen, be as conservative as you want. And I'm not an athlete anymore. I always kind of knock down, like, so in terms of like when I would go in and like to say a physical therapist or a doctor, like I said, I've had a million and one things done as far as trying to get my knee back to back to normal. But they always, the one common thing that they always seem to say is like, well, we'll get you back into lifting, or we'll get you back into sports and running and all. Like, no. Like, all I want to do is that my number one goal is to be able to stand and walk without pain.
Yeah.
And if like that, like if my KPI is like being able to go to a restaurant and or a movie without any anxiety because I'm not feeling that pain,
Yeah.
that's all that matters. Like, I just want to get back to life. I want to be able to and maybe walk around with my kids at Disney World, and not
Right.
feel pain and anxiety from that. And so, setting that expectation for them, like, hey, take as long as you need. I don't need to get back for anything. I just want to
Right.
get back to life. Makes it a little bit easier on them, but they're kind of like a little dumbfounded, like, well, you're this, big weightlifter. And it's like, listen, I don't care about that at all.
Yeah.
So it's a lot, like, I love lifting weights, but it's not anything that I would sacrifice, for my kids and like my mental health. So,
Right. Right.
so yeah, that to me is crucial.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds, and maybe this is a whole other conversation, but it sounds like there's a bit of a shift there in terms of, you talked about the importance of your identity being wrapped up in, being a sport dietitian for the Buccaneers, and in being someone who's, physically very fit at the highest level, and running ultra, triathlons, and doing all these things. And it sounds like your goals have shifted. So I'm curious, maybe we can chat some more at some point about, how you've adjusted or made that transition in your thinking, if in fact that's the case. Um, but and I have a whole bunch more questions that I could ask, but I guess I'll just ask you one more maybe. And it sounds like you've experienced growth in some way or some change, and maybe you can just speak to that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, um, gosh, at least I hope so. Like, I feel like everyone's kind of grown in the last year, from the pandemic. It's kind of been able to kind of find themselves in a way. But like, it's been 3 years for me, and 16 months of it, I've essentially just been in this cocoon. More so like living in Florida. I think everything's been open up for months now, but more so than I would say most people. I've gone from one extreme to the next. So like I've gone from being gone all day, sometimes working 105 hours a week, to now being home all day and sometimes not even getting out of the house. I think after my procedure, my first procedure, I didn't get out of the house for literally 2 weeks. I think the furthest I went was crutching to my mailbox and back. And my car, actually, I thought my battery was dead because I couldn't start my car when I was trying to get to the doctor's appointment. Um, and it was like, I had a brand new battery. It was just the fact that I didn't drive my car at all. And that's been the case for a while now, because I because of the pain, I really haven't left my house a whole lot with this and because of the pandemic, really haven't left my house. I'd say I'd get in the garage on Sunday from going to the grocery store and hanging all over the shop cart, grocery shopping. get home Sunday night from grocery shopping, and I wouldn't leave again until Saturday, and go to the gym just so I can get out of the house and stretch and foam roll therapeutically. So, my growth, there's been a lot. And my wife, she owns her own store, her own health food store, so she's working a ton. And and it's just been me and my puppy. So we got a new dog in January of 2020, and a English bulldog. So it's been me and Ollie is his name. And I think even that experience of like focusing on him and helping him and feeding him, and I'd say, I can't really say walking him, but having a different focus, that's been growth. Focusing on kind of like stepping back out of those two identities that we talked about, and refocusing my purpose and my mission. That's been growth. I don't know. I've kind of come across different hobbies of I read a lot more now. I'm actually in my old high school U.S. history book. For whatever reason, I just felt like opening it up one day. So I'm reading a lot about history. And, I really haven't watched a ton of TV, over the last 16 months, but anyway, it's been, like I said before, I was a caterpillar before. I'm in a cocoon right now. It's allowed me to grow in the sense that I will not take anything for granted now.
Yeah.
Walking, that's one of those things where you don't even think about it when you walk. For most people, you just do it.
Yeah.
But like having to think about that for 3 years, granted, I can't walk right now because I'm on crutches, but like having to think about that for so long, like, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad for taking that for granted, but like, dude, you can walk without pain. You can walk around a store or a grocery store without hovering over the cart. Like, that thing that kind of introduced me to like not taking things for granted, like being able to go places, live life. And I'm not one to I hate being cooped up just like everybody else. But like, I don't want to go from one extreme to the next. I kind of want to like ease into it and not be that person that I was. So that's kind of always in the back of my head. Like, don't just like take this whole thing in vain and just go back and just totally dismiss everything that you learn. Take these and apply these, like when it's time, and that time will come. Be there for other people, use your talents. Like for me, it is, in nutrition and in exercise science, and be there for, and I'm working for GSSI, I still work with athletes. So be there for the athletes, but also be there for the practitioners, because we mostly work with practitioners around the country. And, if it's just the simplest thing, like have a conversation, like to me, it's just those simple things, in developing relationships, that like, that's what life is all about, really, is relationships. So don't take anything for granted.
Well, those are great words to finish our chat, Kevin. I just want to extend my appreciation for you sharing your experiences and all of the things that you've been going through, and I certainly appreciate it, and appreciate your candidness with everything. So
Thank you very much for having me. Like I said before, Les, that I wasn't sure how I wanted to tell my story. I knew that I wanted to tell my story somehow. So I think this was a perfect platform. And, just for the viewers and the listeners out there, if I could just help one person, through our engagement, less like, awesome. And so just know that, like, in terms of, hopefulness, there is hope. If you're going through something that you think that, is there's not hope for you. Well, that's a lie. There's hope. There's people that care about you, you know, and just, you know, the loneliness that you may feel, like there's other people that are going through some of the same things that you are. And, you know, don't lose sight of that. Like, just keep pushing one day at a time.
Yeah. Great, great words. Thanks again. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you very much, Les. Appreciate it, man.